"We're buying the tickets tomorrow. They're $900 each. If you can't afford it, you should stay," Ethan said, like he was talking about the weather. I didn't blink, just nodded. I had already planned to pay for myself. I wasn't asking him to cover anything. But I saw it in his eyes. He thought he was being reasonable. Like telling your mother she's too poor to be part of the family trip was somehow kind. "It's fine," I said. No fight, no begging. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted to go somewhere warm with the people I loved. That's all. Later that afternoon, I sat by the window folding laundry when my phone buzzed. I glanced down. 3728 American Airlines Business Class X4 confirmed. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a scam, but I tapped into the details. The booking was under my saved account, my name, my billing address, but the seats, Ethan, his wife, both of their children, not a single one for me. I just stared at the screen. I hadn't given them my login. But I had let Ethan use my card once, last Christmas, when he said his had been declined. Maybe he saved it. Maybe he thought I wouldn't notice. Or care. Maybe he thought I'd let it slide like I always did. I opened the banking app, locked the card, reported it. Then I sat there, phone still in my hand, as the room around me slowly darkened. Outside, the last of the daylight was fading. Inside, the quiet felt heavier than usual. No one had called to ask. No one had even told me they were booking. They had decided I didn't belong. But my money did. I placed the phone face down on the table and folded the last towel in the basket. Ethan had always been practical. That was the word people used. Teachers, friends, even his father before he passed. He was never cruel, just calculated, always weighing effort against reward. When he got married at 23, he asked if I could help with the down payment on a condo. I drained my savings account without hesitation. A year later, when their second-hand car broke down, I handed them mine and took the bus. I babysat the kids while his wife went back to work. Nights, weekends. Even when my knees were acting up, I never asked for a cent. I figured that's what family was for. That night, my phone rang around 10 p.m. I was in bed, half asleep. Ethan didn't even say hello. "Did you cancel the flights?" he asked, like I was a stranger messing with his plans. I held the phone to my ear for a long second. "Why was my card used?" I asked. He gave a short laugh, tight and dismissive. "You always help. What's the big deal? You would have paid anyway." I didn't respond, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew finally and clearly that nothing I said would matter. He thought I was background noise, automatic, a resource. When he hung up, I didn't cry. I got out of bed, walked to the safe, and pulled the folder labeled "Trust Out" from the bottom. It smelled like paper that had been sealed too long. Inside were documents, property titles, old account records, copies of letters from my sister's estate lawyer. The rentals had sat quiet for years, bringing in enough to keep the taxes paid and repairs managed. I'd planned to pass them to Ethan one day as quietly, but maybe quiet was the problem. I sat down at the kitchen table and turned to the last page, the section for beneficiary updates. My pen hovered over his name. I told myself maybe it was just a misstep. Maybe Ethan hadn't realized what he'd done. Maybe I was overthinking it. But the next morning, as I was making coffee, my phone lit up with a notification. Ethan's wife had posted a group photo, her, Ethan, the kids, all smiling on the front steps. The caption read, "Can't wait for Maui. Thanks for making it possible, Ella." My name right there, public, framed like a sponsor. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't been asked to give. But here I was, already written into their story as the one footing the bill. I clicked into the comments. Dozens of likes, little hearts, palm tree emojis, then one that stung deeper than the rest. "Is she coming too?" Another reply underneath, "She doesn't like beaches, right?" No correction, no mention of me. Ethan had seen the thread. He always saw everything online, but he said nothing. I didn't hit like, didn't comment. I just turned off the screen and set the phone face down. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't hiding what they did. To them, it wasn't betrayal. It was expected. I was the one who needed to catch up to the new arrangement. I stared at the wall for a long time, listening to the soft hum of the fridge. Then I stood up and walked to the cabinet where I kept my old paper address book. It took a moment to find the number. It had been years since we last spoke, but I dialed anyway. Lena picked up on the second ring, her voice steady as always. "You finally calling about the trust?" I hadn't said a word to her in nearly 3 years, but she remembered. "I need to make some changes," I told her. "All right," she said. Tell me what's going on." I did. From Ethan's words to the unauthorized charges to the photo online that turned me into a footnote with a $sign attached. Lena didn't interrupt once, just the faint scratch of her pen across paper on the other end of the line. When I finished, there was silence. Then, "You're still the trustee, Ella, still the sole decision maker. We can update anything you want." I exhaled slowly. "The properties are still under the trust?" "Yes," she said. "2 homes, one on Birch Avenue, one near the lake. Title's clean. Ethan doesn't appear on any of them." He'd never known about those houses. My sister left them to me when she passed, saying, "Use them for family." I'd kept that promise in mind all these years, planned to pass them quietly to Ethan someday. "Can it skip him?" I asked. Lena paused. "Yes, it can go to his children or someone else entirely. You can decide tonight if you want." I sat there with the phone pressed against my ear, staring out at the fading dusk. For a moment, I thought of the night I'd helped Ethan study for his college entrance exam. How proud I was when he got in. How I told myself every sacrifice was worth it. But I wasn't building a legacy anymore. I was cleaning one. "Let's move forward," I said. Lena's tone softened. "All right, I'll prepare everything. I'll email you the revisions tonight." When I hung up, I opened the folder again. My name at the top, still mine. By the time I signed the updated forms and set them aside, the house felt lighter. The woman who once believed silence meant love had gone quiet again. But this time, it was on her own terms. 3 days later, Ethan showed up without calling. I saw his car pull into the driveway, the same one I'd helped him buy 5 years ago. He didn't even knock, just opened the door like it was still his house. "You really canceled the flights," he said, standing there with a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "They weren't yours to book," I replied. He shrugged. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I walked to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and waited for the water to boil. He followed, filling the silence with words that meant nothing. Plans, schedules, the excitement of the kids, the beauty of the resort. When the kettle clicked off, I poured tea into 2 cups and set one in front of him. He didn't say thank you. "You can still come," he said finally, his tone casual, like he was offering me something generous. "If you buy your own seat, I mean." I stirred my tea slowly. "That's generous," I said. He smiled, pleased with himself, completely unaware of what I meant. He glanced around the room, eyes landing on the bookshelf, the framed photos, the same living room he'd grown up in. I could see the faint discomfort on his face, as if the place had become unfamiliar to him. Maybe it had. "I don't get it," he said after a moment. "You always fix things. You always make it work. Why change now?" I took a sip of tea, still warm, still steady. There was no point in explaining that some things stop being fixable once they've been taken for granted too long. "Because things change," I said simply. He frowned like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Then he set his cup down and left without saying goodbye. When the door closed, the quiet that followed didn't feel empty anymore. It felt settled, like the start of something else. I rinsed the cups, dried my hands, and opened my laptop. It was time to finish what I'd started. I moved quickly before doubt could creep in. First, I updated the trust paperwork Lena had sent, designating new beneficiaries. Then I opened a new checking account under a different bank and moved my direct deposits. Utilities that had once been on auto-pay through shared credentials changed. Passwords reset. I canceled the cards Ethan had used just in case during college, and the backup I'd once given his wife when she was between jobs. Everything I'd left open out of trust, out of habit, was now closed. I didn't send a warning, no dramatic declarations, let the silence speak for me. By Wednesday, I had a folder of confirmations and a fresh sense of clarity. No one asked why. No one noticed the shift. They only called when something stopped working. That night, while sipping tea, I checked my phone out of habit and saw a post in the local community group. "Anyone else have issues with a Wells Fargo card being declined when rebooking flights?" The name at the top, his wife's. No shame, no understanding. Just confusion that the faucet had been turned off. I didn't react, just closed the app and turned off the phone. I'd already booked my own trip that morning. Not Maui, not a resort, just a quiet rental a few states away. A porch, a kitchen with a view, a bed with clean sheets I didn't have to make for anyone else. I pulled the small suitcase down from the shelf in the hallway closet, folded a few clothes, added a notebook. It wasn't a vacation. Not really. It was a step towards something that didn't have their names all over it. They'd made plans that didn't include me. Now I was doing the same. And in the silence that followed, I felt something shift again. Not sharp this time, but steady. the kind of quiet that builds, not breaks. By the time I zipped up the suitcase, I already knew what day I'd leave. The airport was busier than I expected. Families jostling through lines, kids dragging suitcases, voices rising over loudspeakers. But I moved through it quietly, my carry-on rolling steadily behind me. One bag. That was all I needed. No oversized luggage, no beach hats, no matching shirts that said Maui Family Trip 2025. I didn't mean to pass their gate, but there it was. Gate 14, just across from where I stopped to check the monitor. I saw them in a blur. Ethan kneeling to tie one child's shoe, his wife adjusting her sunglasses, laughter, noise. They looked like a perfect little group. I didn't wave, didn't slow down. I turned toward gate 27 and kept walking. My plane wasn't headed for an island. It was going to a smaller place, cooler, quieter, with wide open skies and no distractions. I boarded early, tucked my bag in the overhead bin, and slid into the window seat. No one asked me where I was going. No one expected me to be anywhere else. As we waited for takeoff, I reached into my purse and pulled out the leather-bound journal I'd packed. The first page was blank. I clicked my pen and wrote, "Today I left the part of me that always waited to be invited." The words didn't hurt, they just felt true. When the engines hummed and the plane began to taxi, I looked out the window at the shrinking lights. This wasn't a punishment or a protest. It was a departure, in every sense. I took a slow breath and let it out just as the plane lifted off. There had been a time when I would have done anything to sit beside Ethan on a flight like this, sharing peanuts and travel plans. But now I didn't miss that version of us, not anymore. I wasn't chasing memories, I was making something else entirely. By the time we reached cruising altitude, I had already written the next line. The cottage was small, tucked between tall pines and a curve of water that stayed still even when the wind moved. I'd rented it for a month. No commitments, no return address written in stone, just time. Each morning I walked the edge of the inlet, watching the herons stalk through the reeds. I made breakfast slowly. Eggs, toast, strong coffee. I didn't check my phone. I didn't reach out. Ethan didn't call. I wasn't surprised. He was likely too busy making memories that didn't include me. But 2 days into my stay, a notification blinked onto my screen. New email from Lily. I opened it, half expecting it to be a group message or another vacation photo. Instead, I read, "Grandma, I miss you. Can we go to the park again, like before? I like the swings. Love, Lily." I read it twice. There was no ask for money, no adult's fingerprints on the words, just a child's voice, honest and unfiltered. I printed it out and folded it neatly, placing it on the kitchen table. Then I opened the folder with the trust paperwork, reviewed the new terms, and pulled out a yellow notepad. I wrote, "This is for you when you're ready." I didn't write her name. She was still too young for anything legal. But one day, someone would read it to her. Not as a prize, not as a rescue, just a reminder that someone thought ahead. I wouldn't punish a child for her parents' choices, but I wasn't going to pretend those choices didn't matter. I left the papers out, weighed down with a stone I'd picked up from the water's edge that morning. Then I went back outside, sat on the porch, and listened to the rustling trees. There was no noise, no demands, just a stillness that didn't need explaining. That night, as I watched the sun settle low behind the trees, I picked up the envelope again and began sealing it carefully. Weeks went by. I walked each morning, cooked simple meals, sat by the window with a book I never rushed to finish. One afternoon my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Just one line. "Why did you cut me out of everything?" No "Hi, Mom." No "Are you okay?" Just that, blunt and boiling. I didn't reply. I no longer owed him explanations. I had given him decades of answers he never listened to. I forwarded the message to Lena with a single question. "Everything finalized?" She called me later that day. "Yes, locked and recorded. He has no legal claim to the properties. The trust is airtight." I thanked her, then hung up. I knew Ethan would find out eventually, when papers got passed around, when he tried to file for something he thought was his. But he wouldn't hear it from me. Some lessons don't come with warnings. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with the trust binder in front of me. I opened the drawer beside it and pulled out a photo, faded at the edges, creased from years of storage. It was me, maybe 30 years old, standing in front of the first house I ever owned. Hammer in hand, sleeves rolled up, sweat on my neck. I clipped it to the inside of the binder. A reminder I'd built a life once from scratch. Nails, wood, and long shifts on tired feet. And now I was building another one, this time with clarity, intention, and boundaries. The silence Ethan mistook for weakness had always been protection. I just didn't know how to use it before. Now I did. I closed the binder, gently placed it back in the drawer, and folded the envelope with Lily's name one more time before tucking it away. By the time the porch light flicked on, I had already made my decision. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full of things they didn't know, and I was done giving them the blueprint. The market was quiet that morning. A breeze moved through the stalls, lifting the scent of apples and herbs as I walked past rows of tables lined with jars, breads, vegetables still dusted with soil. I stopped at a stand near the end and picked up a bag of apples, firm, sweet-smelling, the kind I liked for baking. The vendor smiled and said nothing more than, "Good pick." No one there knew my name. No one asked if I could cover a bill, watch the kids, or fix a mess that wasn't mine. I paid in cash and walked home with the bag cradled in one arm. That evening, I cooked a dinner for myself, roasted squash, a piece of grilled fish, and a small tart I made from the apples. I plated it nicely, even lit a candle, though there was no guest. I took a photo of the meal, not to send to anyone, just to keep. Later, I reread Lily's email, the one I'd printed and folded days ago. It still made me smile. Then I sat at my desk and wrote her back. No lectures, no bitterness, just, "Yes, we can go to the park, I'd like that." I signed it with my full name. Not Mom, not Grandma, not the helper, just Ella. Because that was enough. The flight to Maui had long since taken off, landed, and come back again. I hadn't missed it. Not the photos, not the beaches, not the matching shirts. But the line I had drawn quietly without warning had stayed firm. It didn't erase the years, but it carved out something new. My kind of wealth didn't shout. It lived in paper trails I controlled, meals I cooked for no one else, and letters I sent, not to fix, but to connect. That night, I tucked Lily's letter into a small wooden box and placed it on my windowsill. The wind was soft through the screen. I poured a cup of tea, turned off the light, and left the rest of the dishes for morning.